So when you hear economic liberalism, you can just think free trade. Essentially, it is you don't set up any barriers, you let the market determine things, and your state then has a role in the marketplace, and everybody gets rich. The more that we have the market being free, the more money there is moving around. Everybody gets lifted up by this, even very poor people. So the argument might go, if you look at the United States is the wealthiest country in the world. Oh, but I look around, I see a bunch of poor people. There's a lot of poor people in the United States. That is true, but if you compare the poor person in the United States to a poor person in, say, Bangladesh, there's not even a close competition there. I mean, that is just, the poor person in the U.S. is still doing much better than the poor person in Bangladesh. A rising tide lifts all boats. And that's sort of the argument behind the whole thing. So one of the things economic nationalism does is it basically allows for the rich kind of get richer, and they can use their wealth to continue to get richer. So it kind of screws over the poorest of the states. So that's where we want to start with economic liberalism. And we're going to start with what's called the least developed countries, LDCs. We sometimes call them underdeveloped states. We sometimes call them the third world, that kind of thing. But these are the poor states. These are Burkina Faso. This is Mali. Global economic cooperation helps the growth of these countries in modernization. Again, the idea being even a poor person in America is still poor, but they're better off than they were if there wasn't sort of capitalism in America. That's sort of the idea here, is that if you look at Burkina Faso, is it poor? Absolutely, it's poor. But let's compare Burkina Faso today to Burkina Faso 30 years ago. There's more medicines, there is more money, there is better access to food, even though it's not great access to food. There are still a lot of people living under $2 a day, but less than there were 30 years ago. So again, a rising tide lifts all boats is sort of the idea here. So the more that Burkina Faso is able to get into the global economy and trade, the better off it's going to be in terms of economic growth and modernization. Rising tide lifts all boats. So modernization requires capital. If you're going to do this, if you're going to sort of move into the modern age, meaning you're going to move from sort of agricultural to industrial economy, it's going to require money. You got to have money. And that money, if you look in Burkina Faso, the money's not there. So where's that money coming from? They need money from either loans, so private, state, and or international. Again, the poorer the state, the less likely they're going to get loans, because no one wants to give money to them because they don't think they'll get the money back. Foreign direct investment, so people outside wanting to invest into that country. Again, poor states, very unlikely to do that. But again, as they start to become less poor, they may be more attractive for banks and states and other things like that, being more attractive to investors from outside. Trade is going to be another way that you can sort of get that money. If you can trade stuff, then more money's coming in, and that can grow things. And then, of course, there's aid, where you just sort of get gifts. All those things. Those are the ways that requires that. And if let's say I'm Burkina Faso and I'd like to get some access to this capital, how do I convince these guys in particular to give me money? And the answer is, I have to do some internal painful changes to do that. It's called the Washington Consensus. We've talked about this before. Go back in your notes and look at this when we talked about the IMF and the World Bank and things like that. But again, by painful changes, what I mean is you're going to have to invest more in infrastructure than you are going to invest in healthcare or poverty reduction. You're going to have to do things to attract people to build factories in your area, which means you need roads, and you need electricity, you need tax breaks for the company, which do not play well politically. But again, this is about economic efficiency, not about politics. International institutions can help out. It would be weird if we had a liberalism idea that didn't allow for international institutions to help provide better cooperation. Some of the main things they can do, and again, when I'm talking about this, I'm talking primarily about an organization like the World Trade Organization, but there's other ones that do this as well. They give expertise on the best internal changes. Think of it almost like a financial advisor who comes in and says, man, you are spending your money all wrong. If you want to retire, with a nest egg, here's what you need to do. Some painful things today. You're going to have to put more money in the bank. You're going to have to invest in this. You're not going to be able to spend money on going out to eat anymore or anything like that. Same thing for poorer states. Investors want to know that their investment is safe. And so these experts, the institutions will suggest, and by suggest I mean you don't get a loan unless you do these things. New laws to, remember we talked about this term, conditionality? I will give you the loan on the condition that you do this. And here's the conditions usually. New laws that will protect property rights better, private ownership. If you tend to be a little more of a socialist economy, don't expect the IMF to be throwing money your way. Implement a market economy, again, free trade. And I have that in quotes because when we say free trade, it doesn't go both ways, right? When the United States gives subsidies to U.S. cotton farmers, that is not free trade. That's not a market economy. But that is what you have to do if you're Burkina Faso trying to get this money. Ensure government will otherwise stay out of economics. So it's very much sort of capitalism 101 here. So the international institutions will sort of provide financial advice. They will supply funds, loans, and or aid, especially if you meet this financial advice. And then international institutions will also go out and sort of try to help raise money from donors, investors for your country as well. So all these things, again, the idea being that the more that everybody invests in this, the more the whole market can grow. All right, we're going to look at some economic sort of ideas here, combine them with politics and trade and all that kind of stuff. So take a look at comparative advantage, and then we will come back.